Right, so why would somebody want to cut their political teeth going up against a three-term incumbent who has a quarter of a century of experience? Well, for me, I would say that I've had two political awakenings, two progressive political awakenings, I would say. And the first was right after college. You know, I've always been interested in politics. I took a lot of politics classes in high school or in college. Student government in high school, all 4 years, and when I got out of school, I went right to Los Angeles. And that was a huge awakening for somebody who had spent their whole life in the southern tier in Ithaca. All of a sudden, I was mixed in to this tremendous amount of diversity right in the last 4 years of the Bush administration, which was really a scary time for a lot of people. And I worked with them, I socialized with them, and it was the first time I think I saw how politics can really affect other people that aren't like me. And so that was really, impactful for me. And then I met my wife out there, which was, I think, maybe the best thing I did in Los Angeles. Certainly my career as a starving artist wasn't fantastic, but I met my wife and we found out we were going to have a child. And for us, that meant we had to get out of LA. And we were thinking, where do we go? And only one place made the list, and that was coming back here to Tompkins County. We felt it was the values we identified with, it was a supportive community, it was a place where people really prioritized what mattered. And that's what you want your children around. So we came back, and that seemed like, oh, okay, maybe, now we're back in Ithaca, it's a politically conscious area, maybe get involved in local politics. Well, of course, you have a family, and now we have 3 kids, and you get busy, and you have jobs, and you always think about it, but it never feels like the right time. And then 2016 comes along, and I would say that was the second political awakening. And not even the Trump victory, but as the 2016 primary started to progress, even before it wrapped up, it was clear we all needed to take a moment and look in the mirror and really decide, are we as progressives or Democrats or even Republicans, are we really backing up our mantra? Are we really doing what we say it is that we stand for? And for me, as much as I love this area and I moved back here specifically for this area, I didn't want to let Tompkins County off the hook. I felt like we should look in the mirror as well. So I started looking into reports, labor, health, poverty, all of these statistics, and then matching that with different offices, school board, town board, legislature, village board. And I found where I thought was a big need in my district in a new, fresh perspective at the legislature. So despite the family and the responsibilities, I felt we have reached a point where it's too important to make excuses. I can only fight with my uncles on social media for so long before I need to get involved. And so that's what put me into this race. I researched it, I looked at the offices, and I said, this is where I feel the most need is. This is where there's need for a more progressive agenda.
That's a great segue.
Thanks. Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm really
He's so
perspiring
tall.
here. That green room out there is really humid tonight,
The green room outside?
especially when you walk laps around the block.
I'm sorry.
Parents don't get a lot of time to exercise. It's pretty bad.
Sorry for that, too. What does being progressive mean to you? That's a perfect segue.
What does being progressive mean to me? I would say, quite simply for me, it's people before profits. I think we've reached a point now where so many of the issues we clash over, whether it's the left versus the right, even infighting amongst the liberal side of the political sphere, I think we have a lot of people hanging on to the economic benefits that really hurt a lot of the rest of us. And if we just take a moment and realize that a little bit of sharing can actually go a long way in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different areas. I think economics are such a big part of so many of our issues. So many of our social issues have economic roots. And so I think being a progressive is standing up and saying, look, if I need to put a little more out of my pocket so we can have a living wage, I'm going to do that. If I have to pay higher taxes so you have health care and I have health care and everybody has health care, I will do that. It's when you don't say that that I think we have a problem. And I think to me that's really what progressivism is. It's saying, people and community, balancing the playing field is far more important than my own personal gain.
So what is your approach to consensus building in a group? And please give an example that illustrates that approach.
Consensus building in a group. Well, I think the key to consensus building is being an extraordinarily good listener. I think it's really easy to lead with our opinions, to really dive in and say, here's how things are, here's what I believe, here's why you're wrong, and here's why we need to pass this bill. I think we need to get better at listening, at hearing other viewpoints, and then knowing how to articulate rebuttals. Looking at things from an analytical standpoint versus an emotional standpoint. I think we can find a lot of common ground if we take emotion out of it. If we look at things from evidence-based and not so much knee-jerk or, well, this is what my party believes, so this is what I have to believe. And you're that party, so I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say. We're so polarized right now, and I think if we just take the time to listen and hear opposing viewpoints and really make people feel like we're listening. We don't want to act. We actually want to listen and find out why many of us in this room think so many people in this country vote against their own self-interest. They don't think they're doing that, so we need to listen. We need to get better at understanding what it is people believe and why they believe it. And I think our campaign to date has really taken this head on. We are knocking on doors, on houses where there's registered Republicans, and the House looks like knocking on the door might be the thing that finishes it off. And these are places that, your own bias, you have to fight against that. Because there's times where I walk up to places and you think just by, generalizing someone's home or their property and what their registration says that you're not going to have agreement, that they're going to give you a fight, that they might yell at you. But we've been doing that. And I think when we have conversations with people, we find that this progressive agenda really resonates with everybody. If you just take the time and talk it out and hash it out and say, well, why do you feel this way? Why do you perceive me as somebody that's giving all your money away and giving handouts and things like that? So I think the best way you build consensus is by really honoring the room, letting people know that you're listening, that you don't assume you're correct all the time, and that you're willing to really genuinely appreciate their viewpoint.
An example of a time when you built consensus?
So I think I think working in academia and where I work is at kind of the forefront of digital communications. And academia, and now I work at a science institute, so I think these are two places that are very slow to change, two places that really think they have it all figured out and that there's not much to learn. And so when I started at Cornell, for example, 5.5 years ago, there were several higher up administrators who felt like I was a waste of money, that my boss and I were a burden on the books. And through time, through understanding what they perceived as pain points, through what they were stereotyping my job to be and what I am and why I'm there, and just actually sitting down with them, meeting them head on, and saying, hey, let me show you how I'm improving our bottom line. You don't think I am? Let me show you how I am. You might not like me right now, but at least let's have a civil conversation. And we really, chipped away at that hard for several years. And then we ended up, developing a team that became kind of the envy of higher education in terms of digital communications. And all the people that, thought we were a waste of money, all of a sudden were applauding us and promoting the fact that we were on the road sharing our success stories at Cornell. So I think the lesson there is, the more disagreement you have with people, the more you should meet them head on and don't try to run from disagreement.
Are you worried about potential loss of federal funding from Medicaid? If that did happen, how would you approach this with your colleagues to do your best to ensure everyone received health care or receives?
Yeah, so it might be simplistic, but I think the answer there is there's plenty of money in this state. I think we just have to make people put it up. I think Wall Street, for instance, has a tremendous amount of money that, if taxed appropriately, could help everybody in the state. The way I look at it is, in terms of Wall Street, if this were to happen, we all as taxpayers bailed them out. So I think they owe us a bailout if need be. I don't think that's too much to ask. I think the tax rate in our state, I think, was once for upper incomes, I think was, for a corporate tax rate was as high at some point as 36% or something around there, and now it's 6%. So I think there's money to be made. There's money that can go back to the community, and it might seem hard on the county level to push Wall Street or the state to give more money, but I think if you build consensus, looking at the last question, amongst other counties, amongst people within the state, I think you could create enough pressure where, it would be either health care for our communities or we suffer, and I don't think they can let that happen. I think they owe us one.
Is there a system that you would outline?
A healthcare system? Well, certainly, I'm a big proponent of single payer, and I think we're very close at the state level to getting that. And if we get that, hopefully this wouldn't be a problem.
Do you see systemic discrimination and racial exclusion in the county or the municipality that you are running for? If so, how would you address it as an elected official, and what specific plans would you try to enact? If not, please describe your district.
Yeah, so I would say that discrimination is everywhere. I don't think there's a place where it doesn't exist. So I can't imagine anyone would say that it doesn't exist in their district or in their town. I think right now in Trumansburg, we're seeing that a little bit firsthand with the amount of pushback we're seeing with regards to a potential housing project there. If you attend the village board meetings and planning board meetings, you hear a lot of arguments about engineering, drainage, traffic, but you also hear rhetoric about low-income residents and what that will bring to the community. And it's a really unfortunate dialogue. And probably at this point, 2 months ago, there was actually right after INHS presented the initial open house of the project, there was many of us in the neighborhood received a letter on our door, a printed letter. And it was a very disturbing letter. It had a lot of veiled racist language, and it was disturbing to a lot of us. So I immediately called up a number of my neighbors and said, look, we can't let this, be the official statement of Trumansburg. I mean, this is garbage. We have to have a rebuttal. If this goes public all over the county, we are going to be labeled as awful people. Not that we don't have work to do in that regard, but I didn't feel that letter was representative of our community. And so, banding together with several other neighbors, we crafted a response. And basically, we said, look, we're gonna stomp this out. We're not going to let this be the how people define Trumansburg or how they think we approach housing projects. And that was 2 months ago, and it has only become more kind of heated ever since. But I think that's an example of when you see discrimination, even in its most veiled sense, you need to nip it in the bud. It's up to the community to stand up and say, we're not letting this go any further. And there's still people kind of pushing this rhetoric, and we're still pushing back against it. How am I personally trying to be better on these issues? Attending things around town that help me better understand, racial issues, tapping into any of my own personal biases that exist. And, I believe it's next month, I'll be doing the Talking Circles workshop to better understand these issues and bring that voice and that perspective to my district, which I don't think exists in our current representative.
What is your stance on increasing property taxes to address local community needs?
Well, I think there's people that can pay more in property tax and should, and I think there's people that should not be expected to take on a new tax burden. And I think we would have to, that goes back, I think, to what do I view as progressive? And I think those of us that have the means have to be willing to step up and say, we'll pay more to make sure we can maintain the services, especially at the county level. I mean, the county is essentially a human services organization that really supplies residents with so many crucial needs. So I think property tax increases don't bother me because I trust they'll be doing good. But I think at the same time, you walk around, you knock on doors, you get petition signatures, you ask people, what are your major issues with local government, with county government? And some people are like, I don't know, this, that. But usually the default answer for most people is taxes. And taxes are inevitable, but I think we can do a better job communicating what taxes do, what taxes provide. I mean, if it's just a tax, a bill in the mail, and people are busy, people have families, people don't understand why they have to pay so much in taxes or what services are being provided because of these taxes. I mean, go to the county website and look at all the services that the county provides. That's what your taxes do, but people don't think about it in that way. So telling a better story about what taxes do for the community, I think, is essential to helping people realize that a tax increase is not just money out of your pocket. It's not just being a waste, and it really has a really humane ending when you give up that money.
So the DIA currently approves abatements for
IDA.
The IDA.
I studied.
I'm on the DIA. The IDA currently approves abatements for large developments, including hotels and residential buildings. In your opinion, can you describe some of the pros and cons of this program and what requirements you would support that could benefit the community as well as the developer?
Yeah, so this is a big issue and a really heated issue, and it's an issue I talk to many people about. A lot of people tell me I'm wrong to not support the current way that we are choosing to develop. People on city council that I've met with tell me I'm wrong, people that I generally respect. But I stand by the notion that abatements were put in place for a very specific reason. They were put in place to add good paying, long-term jobs to the local community. And when you give a development agency $10 million to put up a market rate apartment building, for example, and that's going to employ maybe a handful of people at best for not even a living wage, and you may or may not use local labor, all of a sudden you have to wonder, what is the community benefit for this abatement? Why are we giving money to people so they can make a better profit? I mean, we're not even offering these abatements all the time for affordable housing or nonprofit sector, but we're allowing them for companies that are going to make a great profit anyway. So I think development is good. We need development. We need strategic development, which I think the county has done a good job outlining, especially in terms of housing. But development has to be a community benefit. And the community has to have more say. The community should be allowed to negotiate, community benefit agreements to say, okay, if for some reason Marriott, you have to have $10 million or $9 million to put up this hotel, which we think will benefit our economy. Maybe you can throw some money towards, Friends of Stewart Park. I think there's more we can hold them to. But for the most part, I'm not anti-abatement if it brings those jobs. If it's a tech firm that brings, 100 jobs that pay an average of $50 an hour, sure, take $10 million, come to town and stay forever. But for some of the ways in which we're using these abatements and what we're offering, I think it's unfair. It's unfair when you go door to door and people feel squeezed by taxes, and then they see big corporations that are very profitable getting tax breaks. Now, again, people will argue with me and tell me that I'm wrong, that things trickle down and it's all good. But at the very least, those optics are incredibly bad for people that don't feel like they're getting what they need. Oh, so let me just say on that question, I probably didn't say this part, that when we do offer abatements, it has to be, you're going to hire people for a living wage, you're going to utilize or maximize as much local labor as you can, and it's a non-starter otherwise.
So Cuomo wants every county in the state to look into consolidation of government offices. How do you think that Tompkins County should approach this, and how would you go about implementing your recommendation?
Well, I think Tompkins County should probably approach it the way it did 20 years ago when it kind of set the bar for this stuff. Everyone I talk to on this issue, you spend an hour or so in Joe Marine's office and, his blood pressure starts to rise because of how much work he feels the county has done on this issue before Cuomo started demanding these consolidation efforts. So I think the county's done a really good job and has been quite a trailblazer in many respects with regards to consolidation. And the strategy that's in place right now that was just updated at the last legislature meeting, I think is a really good plan. I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult when you have a governor that's trying to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze counties. You could even argue that this is a governor trying to balance his books off the backs of counties, despite how much our county has done. So I know there's a lot of local officials who have met and just said we're just going to look for things to tweak here and there and report those as updated changes. And I don't know how much more you can do than that, honestly, because I think the county has done such a good job in being ahead in this situation. And I think there comes a point where, you have to do everything you can to kind of stand up to Albany and say, look, we're going around to different communities showing them how to do this stuff. We're in Cortland, we're in other places, we're showing people the blueprint for doing this, and you want more for us. So I think, I don't know if that's a good answer, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for what the county has done already, and I just generally think it's unfair to try to squeeze more and expect more out of a Tompkins County. And I think I think all you could do is look for the small things to change, so at least you can, on paper, report that you're trying, even though I think we're in a pretty good spot. But I do like a lot of the new changes that have been talked about regarding sharing business expenses, software consolidation. I think there's a lot of things with regards to technology that all the municipalities could benefit from, and I love the LED light program as well. I think that's a great thing.
All the things that are in that, right?
Yeah.
So last question from my page. If you have other paid work or family demand, can you tell us how you plan to balance your responsibilities? How many hours a week can you allot to your responsibilities at the legislature?
That's because I have 3 kids, right?
I know, I think I've asked most people.
No, I know, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I do have a young family. And some of the early conversations I've had, and I have a full-time job. So right now, anyway, I'm currently on parental leave. I hope it's still there when I go back, but if not, anybody knows a good lawyer, that would be great. So I have a young family, and I get this question a lot. When I meet with people, they'll ask me, so how do you envision being on the legislature when you have a young family? And my initial thought is, well, I don't think local government is just for the retired and the childless. I think having a young family in 2017 is a tremendously important perspective, considering the cost and the pain points that so many families have, the affordability issues just in this county. You know, I meet a lot of families that love Ithaca, they want to be here, but they said, you know, the banker, he's a banker, usually they have money, but the banker who opened my campaign account for me said, yeah, I used to live in your district, but I moved to Cortland County when my daughter was born because we were able to get a house where the mortgage was $400 less a month than the rent I was paying in Ulysses. And he said it wasn't even a glorious apartment. So understanding, you know, the complexities and the challenges of a young family right now, I think is an important voice. But how do I balance that? So I really believe that, you know, I'm not running for office or want to serve in office despite my family. I'm serving because of my family. I believe that I want to try to make a difference while, you know, to help provide something for my kids and other young families so that they can actually kind of cash in on the work I've done. I wait until I'm retired and my kids are in college, you know, or in high school. I feel like I want to be a part of this now, and I feel like the time is right. So how do you balance that? Well, I last year, I think four different companies I file a W-2 with. So I'm accustomed to working many jobs outside of my day job. I teach at Ithaca College. I teach two classes twice a week. So I'm out of the house, you know, just out of the house an extra 4 hours or 8 hours a week. Doesn't count grading, lesson planning, office hours. So my family, like a lot of young families that make a living, have learned to schedule. Time management is incredibly important in my household. So essentially, I would be trading all these part-time jobs. Teaching is at least, I would say, 20 hours a week, giving all those up for a seat in the legislature. And I don't think that would be a huge problem for my family. The first thing they tell you is to consult with your family before you decide to run for office. My wife is not afraid to tell me her opinion and doesn't hold back. So if she really felt like I shouldn't be running for office, then I wouldn't be running for office. And actually, she was the one that even pushed me. She said, you know what, like, I've watched you debate these issues. I've watched you get frustrated. I've watched you get in fights during Thanksgiving dinner. I've watched you, she's from the Midwest down in Southern Illinois, so some of the dialogue around the golf course there leads to some conflicts with me. But she says, I've seen this, and I, you need to do this. Now's the time. So the family understands. We have family support in town with my grandparents and my brother and his family. But we are a family that's very accustomed to balancing time. Dad having a second job and everything. And I would also say that I've been very honest with my current employer, where I'm right now putting in 40 to 50 hours a week. I said, look, if this goes well, we might want to talk about, what a reduction in hours and even salary might look like. And that was a discussion that they were open to. So I'm very aware of the demands, and that was a huge consideration before even starting all this.
Any questions from the community?
My name's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
I live in District 5. This afternoon you filed petitions to run for the legislature as a member of the Independence Party.
Yes.
On a line with Republicans from Dryden, Groton, and Newfield. Mm-hmm. This is different than running as an independent.
Right. Among
the other candidacies as a conservative-leaning party sponsored at the past election were those of Libertarian Gary Johnson and Republicans Tom Reed and Tom O'Mara. How do you reconcile progressive values with those of the party with which you're running?
Well, this was a long, thorough debate amongst my campaign. My membership in the Independence Party was a product of trying to be unaffiliated and ending up in the Independence Party, like we're finding many people have fallen victim to. But I don't even know if I would call it falling victim to, because there have been Democrats on this line. Kirsten Gillibrand has run on this line, and we know that. But we also know that within intense political circles, there is a reputation, and there's been a lot of conservatives on this line. Before making the decision to stay with this line, we wanted to see what the people looked like that would sign our petitions. Did they align with our platform? You know, are the independence people in the 5th District Independence Party members in the conservative sense, or are they liberals who think they're non-affiliated? And I would argue that at least 90% of the doors we have knocked on, the people feel they're non-affiliated, and they are progressive, and they like our platform. And as an independent, we don't have the luxury of running from a ballot line. You know, we need to be on the ballot as many times as we can. And we think, and we really believe this, and we think our research has found this, that the reputation of the Independence Party is very much inside baseball. And we think that when voters go to cast a ballot, they're not going to look at my name, and they shouldn't look at my name for party, because I should have been at their door. If I'm not at their door convincing them to vote for me, then I'm not doing my job anyway. So I don't think my party affiliation in this regard matters to voters. Because if I introduce myself, if I share my platform, they're going to the ballot box to vote for me, for my name, not my party. And we're running away from that mentality. And if people want to cast us as conservatives, I mean, if I was a conservative, I wouldn't be standing here. I don't know how many conservatives or Republicans you've interviewed during this process, but I can tell you that I'm not conservative. But at the same time, we trust that the average voter doesn't buy into this knowledge of what the independence line means to many people. You know, I talked to people in Albany about this, some people I know that work on campaigns, and their attitude was pretty much, look, the independence line is a line that wants people that think they are going to win so that they can keep showing up on ballots. We're also going to create an independent line, so we won't solely be on the independence line. And I think that will help people understand that what's important to us is that we're independent, not that we share whatever the perceived values of the Independence Party may be. But again, you know, we're running away from the idea that a party affiliation says everything you need to know about me as a candidate, okay? I'm not gonna win if I don't show up at your door as an independent. That's just how it is. And so we're gonna show up at your door and let you make the judgment on your own. We don't think you're gonna look at political party. We think you're gonna look at the name. You're gonna remember that name because I knocked on your door, I talked to you for 10 minutes, and then I followed up with a call or an email.
They say that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Can you talk about the progressive causes and organizations you've been involved with?
Sure. I would think the most recent one that I've been involved with, I would say, is the IC Contingent Faculty Union. That was a situation where, as a contingent faculty member, to be perfectly honest, I had a full-time job, so I didn't have a ton to really gain from the pay increase that everyone was pursuing, but I knew a lot of my colleagues did. And I think being a progressive, especially right now, is really about, are you able to, when the lights are on, are you able to stand up and boast those values even when it's difficult? And the faculty union situation was difficult for me. You know, going to pickets and marching on campus where I went to school, where I have close friends in the administration. So being part of that movement and helping communicate that movement was difficult at times. It has, I would say, severed some relationships. But I think that's what we really need more of, the willingness to push forward and be willing to sacrifice in the name of these progressive causes. Other organizations that I've been a part of, most of my volunteer experience is doing some coaching. That's not really progressive, but 12 5-year-olds by yourself playing t-ball, you'll earn some. You'll respect that if you've ever done it. Volunteered for the Cancer Resource Center, Children's Garden. You can see a number of things on my website, but yeah, I haven't. I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't chained myself to a fence for gas-free Seneca or things like that. There's some people that have made some real big sacrifices and have really stood on the front lines for many years. I mean, for a lot of people, I feel, almost a little bad because they've been so progressive for so long, especially around here, and it's almost like it's finally getting its due, and I certainly have a ton of respect for that and the sacrifice that's been made to date. And I think while I can't boast as much experience as some of those people, I think running for this office and serving the community and projecting that sacrifice and the values that go along with it is what I can do, and I think I have the skills to do that on their behalf.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you guys all so much for coming. I really appreciate your support in this process, and these videos will be online soon or up on the local TV station first. And we do have other candidates that are not in races that are running against anybody who are also interested in our endorsement. We're going to probably take a few weeks of break and let us all breathe and vote on these races first, and then we'll be back with that information. But thank you again, and if you have any questions, I'll be here. Thank you.